Hello, everyone. If you are here for AMS and CRM implementation horror stories, you are in the right place. We are going to get started right around the top of the hour, so hang tight, grab your coffee, get a potty break, whatever you need to do while we let our other colleagues get settled. We'll get started soon. We are right at the top of the hour. We're going to give our friends that are still joining us another 30 seconds or so, and then we will get started. Glad you guys are here. Hello, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world today. You are in the right place if you are here for the webinar Implementation Horror Stories. We're going to be talking AMS and CMS. I'm so glad you're here. I feel like I should almost have some spooky music playing in the background because Chris's slide here, the title slide, is really got us playing with our theme for today. I am Terry Cardin. I am the founder of ReviewMyAMS.com. I'm also the creator of an event called AMS Fest. Actually, the next one's coming up right around the corner, like next week, I think, November 6th, 7th. So check it out, amsfest.com for more information. I know Cobalt's going to be there, so I'm stoked to see them, and I'm stoked to be hanging out with all of you guys today. For those of you that may not know, ReviewMyAMS is actually home to more than 1,000 end user reviews on more than 65 association management systems, including Cobalt. So when companies like Cobalt support ReviewMyAMS, it basically means that they stand for transparency in the AMS marketplace. These guys get it. They understand the importance of the association professional's voice. You guys, your voices matter, and they get it that your opinion on technologies that they matter, and they're listening to what's happening in the association space. I'm going to turn it over to my friend Chris in just a few moments, but let's cover a couple housekeeping items as I see the rest of our crowd is joining us. This webinar is being recorded and it will be accessible on the ReviewMyAMS blog, on YouTube, on the Cobalt website probably, and all the other good places to find great content in the following few days. It's going to be there with some key takeaways on the ReviewMyAMS blog, so you can dig for it there, or feel free to even just harass me anytime and I'll get it to you. And if you find today's webinar helpful, we would love for you to pass it on to your colleagues. This is the perfect time of year to pass on a little spooky content. So we have a feeling that you're probably going to have some questions, and that's awesome. We want to answer your questions, but so that we don't interrupt the flow of today's webinar, we're going to take those last few minutes, 10 minutes or so at the end, and field all your burning questions. But don't wait to the end to ask your questions. When that question comes to you, anytime during the presentation, feel free to enter it there in the questions tab in your GoToWebinar window, and we will do our darndest to get to that question at the end. Now, enough about all of that. Let's get down to today's business, spooky business. And for that, I'm going to turn it over to my friend, Chris Capistran at Cobalt. He's actually been working with associations since he interned. Hey guys, that was a long time ago. No, I'm just kidding, Chris. With the American Council of Engineering Companies. In fact, Chris was Cobalt's first association customer while managing a joint program between the Engineering Companies Association and USAID. After the project was complete, Chris decided to join up with his friends and classmates from Georgetown in 1998, and he has been at Cobalt ever since. Chris has worn many hats over the years, but as Cobalt's president, he currently oversees product development, sales, and marketing. Chris also has a Bachelor's of Science in Foreign Service degree from Georgetown and a Master's of Business Administration degree from the University of San Francisco. But the fun parts now, in his spare time, he enjoys time with his wife, Courtney, daughters, Lauren and Emily, and a new puppy, Hazel. Chris and his family live in Old Town Alexandria, and his best days are when he can take the top of his Jeep and go for a long ride to the Potomac. Now, that sounds like it would be an awesome day. Chris, it's your turn. Take it away, buddy.
Thanks, Terry. Thank you, everybody, for joining today. I'm excited about this. If any of you come to Cobalt's blog, you'll see a decent amount of content from me. And if you've met me or read anything that I've written, you'll know that I have reasonably strong opinions and I don't pull any punches. So hopefully that is helpful to everybody. We also do buy into what Terry is doing with ReviewMyAMS to have transparency and openness in the industry, especially as people are trying to select a new system. So that said, this webinar today is less about selection. It's sort of after you found the right partner, and we love what we do and we have great customers. We also know that our competitors, some of which I can see in the attendee window, there's a lot of great options out there in the industry. So, once you've gone through that process, you've found the right partner. We really believe that fit between organizations and fit of system with the organization is really huge. So, we know we don't always fit with everybody, and some people fit better with other people, and some people, are good fits for Cobalt. But once you do find that match, now you have to sort of roll up your sleeves and get into the implementation process. And that's what I'm really going to touch on today. And I, themed this obviously a little bit from a Halloween standpoint. I wrote a blog with similar content last month, and I'm going to kind of walk through that today and talk about some common pitfalls to look out for and some ways to get around that. Hopefully I didn't get too heavy-handed with the Halloween theme, but maybe I got a little carried away. So I guess we'll see as I jump into the content. So what we're going to do today is we're going to touch on 4 major areas where things have the potential to go sideways. Talk about the background of that and why that can happen, and then talk about what you can do to prevent or mitigate those challenges. And what also I'll throw in some tips and tricks for things that we do with our customers that will hopefully help you as you're on your path to a new system. So let's go ahead and dive right in. And yeah, here we go. So the first thing that we encounter here is I want everything under the sun. So maybe it's been 5, 7, 10 years on your current system. You've built up this enormous backlog of wants and needs and must-haves and I'd really like tos. And so when you sit down to start your implementation, you've really got this massive universe of possibilities. And a lot of the instinct of the day-to-day system users and different people is we need to get everything implemented, every feature, everything I've ever wanted we want that all implemented as part of this new system implementation. We've even had customers over the year, we've gone in and interviewed staff, and people would, as we're talking to them about their association management software, they're, well, we don't like, the phone system really bothers me. And I have to say, well, this isn't the list of everything, your chair's not comfortable, we can't solve that with your AMS implementation. So those are obviously extreme examples, but the one thing that you really need to look out for is, you have this, these expectations of everything to be perfect, everything to be ideal, and you want to implement every single idea as possible. Obviously, that can cause a problem. Not every idea can be implemented, not successfully and not within a reasonable time frame. So you really need to focus on how to cut through that. So one of the things that we tell our clients a lot of times, and it's an old saying, we obviously didn't make this up, but don't let the great get in the way of the good. So you're trying for a perfect system, something that's going to make everyone happy, check every single box. That's probably unlikely to be realistic. So what you should do is make sure that you have a really good, solid system in place, because you might shoot for the moon and fall short, and that could be a worse situation than having realistic expectations and priorities. So, as I kind of put here on the slide, be decisive. Another thing that we talk about is, decisiveness creates momentum, and over-analysis, paralysis can really destroy the momentum of a project. So make decisions and move forward. We also talk about prioritization. Go live with a system that gives you what you absolutely need, and save some of those ideas in your backlog. You're probably going to want to do a follow-up to an implementation. We see that. We encourage our customers, get the absolute must-haves in the system. You want people to be excited, so you want, hopefully, if you're going for a new system that you've been using an older system, there's already some really cool new features just out of the box that are going to get people excited. So leverage that, and then get the system out into the wild, both for staff and members, and gather some feedback, because we find things that you thought you absolutely had to have, or some people in the organization might think you absolutely have to have, 90 days, 180 days after implementation, you sit back and reassess those priorities, and a lot of those items still are at the bottom of the list because you found new things based on feedback you've received from other people. So that's a really important thing. Don't let that kill your project. Objectives and priorities. So we're often surprised when we talk to some organizations. You really need to sit down and think through this and articulate it. Is why are you doing this project? What are the objectives? What are you trying to get out of it? Yes, maybe your old system is old and maybe the technology it's on is being deprecated. Those are good reasons to look for a new system, but what are you trying to get out of the new system? And really being able to succinctly, when we talk in sales world as a software provider, you talk about your elevator pitch. What is your elevator pitch for the software that we are selling? What's Cobalt's elevator pitch? Well, you should be able to tell someone within your organization, leadership, a board member, a friend, a spouse, whoever it is, if somebody asks you, why are you doing this? You should be able to give them a really succinct answer to that. Because if you can't, it's going to be hard to keep that North Star going forward for the project. So kind of the final thing there, which kind of ties it all together, is put it in writing. Don't just talk about it. Don't have it be loose. Put it in writing. At Cobalt, we use our project charter. So we have a charter with all of our customers. Every customer, we have their project team and their leadership, along with Cobalt's team on our side. We agree to the objectives, the success criteria. We identify what constraints there might be on the organization, and then we talk about risks and what we would do if those risks come true and how to mitigate those. And we actually put that into a document that we all sign. It just means more when you sign it. So everybody signs the document, and then we use that as our guidepost for the whole project. And we come back to it when we have to make tough decisions or things start to slip or go astray. You come back to that project charter and say, okay, here's what our objectives were, here's where our priorities are. This item that came out of left field is not a priority. It doesn't fit into the project charter. So let's stay on track and move forward. So that's the first major one, and really that as we get into this implementation best practices, we put the project charter mechanism in place. I think it was about 6 or 7 years ago. It's been hugely successful for us in terms of doing implementations, and it really helps guide that. And we work with our customers up front to really build out that project charter. So if there's any ambiguity there, we've got it all down on paper. So hope that's helpful for people. Now I'm going to move on to horror story number 2. And this one seems pretty obvious. And I titled it here, Busyness kills the business. So everyone has day-to-day jobs. Everyone has things to do. It's really hard to add an implementation on top of that. It's probably one of the bigger challenges that our organizations that we work with run into, is that the people that are on the project team or the subject matter experts, they have day-to-day jobs. You guys are busy. You have a lot of work to do. But doing this implementation is also a decent amount of work. So you can't say, oh, we blocked off a whole day for 2 people at the organization to get up to speed on everything. No, there's a much bigger commitment, there. So you really need to commit to that. So like anything else, the more you invest, the more you're going to get back. So the more time that you can put into this process, the larger the benefit. So obviously the first step there is you need to identify who those people are. Key stakeholders and subject matter experts are key. It doesn't have to be a top-down structure. Sometimes, the people that are in the day-to-day are often the most valuable people on these projects. And so getting those people involved and carving out the necessary time for them to be involved is absolutely critical. So when we talk to customers, we will tell them, you need to figure out 20 to 25% of whatever amount of time we're going to spend on the project. You need to have your staff spending 20 to 25% of that. So if we're spending 500 hours, then you need to spend 100, 150 hours in order to be effective. Obviously, if you can spend more time, that's even better. With our system and with a lot of other systems on the market today, there's a lot of what we categorize as advanced configuration, where it doesn't take developers or hardcore customizations to implement, but it still takes time and effort. Another way to get your staff more familiar with the new system is to have them do some of the heavy lifting on the configuration. Yes, it's going to take more time, but ultimately they're going to know the system better. And the side benefit of that, it's going to save you a little bit of money, because you're not paying people on my team to do those implementations that don't require actual hardcore programming or technical skills. So some of our most successful implementations is when we train our customers and allow them to do a decent amount of that work, because then at the end of the project, that 2, 3, 4, 5 people that were involved in that, now they're power users, and you've gotten huge bang for your buck out of that from an ongoing basis, from efficiency of the rest of the staff, and again, just cost savings. The less you have to go back to your partner, the less money you spend, and the more efficient you are. So self-sufficiency, always a good thing. Believe it or not, it's a good thing for us as much as it is a good thing for you. We'd much rather have our customers be self-sufficient with their systems. So The third point here is getting buy-in and backup from leadership. So you need that executive champion or executive sponsor. It's actually one of the roles we identify in our project charter, is to really identify who within the leadership team, somebody with enough power to influence, make decisions, and most importantly, be able to carve out people's time. So when we inevitably get to that situation where it says, okay, well, John needs to spend, 3 days next week testing the new system and checking the data to make sure it was converted properly, that somebody there in power can really back that up and say, oh, these other things that might have been on John's plate, we need to shift that to somebody else. So that's a really important aspect of the system as well. So inevitably you're going to hear moaning. Sometimes I say grumbling. Maybe not everybody's on board with the new system. Maybe some people are really happy because they've been using the old system and they know exactly how to do their job every day, and they see the new system as a negative. It's something else they need to learn. They're worried it's going to cause them more pain. They're very happy. They've got their 10-step process for what they do, and or there could be other reasons why maybe they liked the other finalist when you were in your selection process, and they're not happy that you chose the vendor that you chose. So that's inevitable. We can have that. We've had customers, and I like to always say I change the name. I don't use anyone's names to protect the innocent. We've had horror stories. This is a long, long time ago now, so I can think statute of limitations has passed. But we had a customer who had staff continuing to use their old system, and the COO, who's the number 2 at the organization, had to physically take the server that the people were using and lock it in a closet that he had the key for, because people were just not adopting the new system and continuing to try to use the old system to do their day-to-day jobs. So you're going to have not everyone's going to be happy. And we talked about prioritization on the front end. Somebody's idea didn't make the cut. But you still have to find a way to push through that. So one of the keys there is, you need to get buy-in, or at least as much buy-in as you can. When you couple that with the executive leadership and the executive sponsorship, sometimes you just need to get everyone on the right train moving forward. So listening to everyone up front, surveying, involving them in the process, making it clear that not everything's going to get done. Each organization has their own culture, so you can figure out exactly how that works best for you. But I think that's clear to say these are the priorities of the organization. Again, we go back to the project charter. If you've got 2 or 3 top objectives and some success criteria attached to that, then you can go back and say, well, this idea doesn't fit into those objectives, and therefore it doesn't make the cut, but we'll keep it in the backlog for moving forward. The other thing you need to look out for is, I talked about grumbling and moaning, but sometimes it's the people you don't hear that you really need to look out for. So this goes back to really engaging people. If certain staff, or even worse, departments or groups of staff, seem like they're disengaged from the process, that could be a real red flag, and you really want to go out of your way. If you're sort of leading the team in terms of the implementation, you've got to go out of your way to pull that out of people, even if it's things you don't want to hear, because it's better to get that out in the open before it causes problems down the road. We don't want to get to the end of an implementation and have people hold back, and there's either requirements or things that are critical to day-to-day operations that get missed because people aren't being an active part of the process. The next thing there is, don't forget about your probably largest audience, which are your members. So when your system goes live, they're going to be touching it on a, as a collective group, probably more often than you are. Yes, each individual member might not be in the system every day. We could all hope that they would come to your website and be in your system every day, but we know that's probably not how it really happens. But again, they're used to what's out there, and so you need to really take that into consideration. Loop them in as much as is practical, is what I usually like to say. Kind of to my last point there, is that can be a little bit tricky, right? So getting feedback, especially externally, can be a little bit tricky because you want people to be providing feedback and input, but they also have to understand that, again, you have to go back to that prioritization, that not everything that you do, not everything that they ask for, every piece of feedback they provide is going to be implemented. We had another unnamed organization that we worked with a few years back where it was a real misstep for them. They had an idea of what their members needed and wanted. They implemented it, and when they went to launch, they got a lot of pushback from their members, and we had to really quickly adapt with them to be able to make some changes because they had some feedback from some people, but it apparently wasn't enough, and it was a real major issue there. So really trying to get a feel for that before you hit the go live button, is really key. So this is probably my favorite, just because I've been doing this for a long time, and we don't see this as much as we used to. For everyone on the phone who's been, or watching this recording, who's been around in the industry for a long time, we all remember the days where, everything was so, intertwined or all part of one massive system. So a lot of times you would redo your website at the same time you implemented a new association management system. We see less and less of that these days as sort of best of breed software for all the different things that people do have come to play. But this is also one that you really need to look out for. So if you say, okay, we need a new AMS or CRM, we also need a new website content management system, and you know what, now that we're looking at it, that accounting system, we put that in place before we put in the AMS, and that's really old. So we should either replace or upgrade that. And you start to get a little, in my opinion, a little carried away with everything. And now you've got 3 or 4 projects on the books, and that's gonna, that's gonna make things even more difficult than we've already talked about. Implementing the association management system, which is, probably the hub of your organization, is challenging enough, but lining that up with another system upgrade or switch is really challenging. So it may be necessary, but we would definitely discourage it if at all possible, or order them in the proper way. So sorry. So it's going all over the place there. So that would be, one that I'd really encourage people to think about. So if you have a system like an accounting system or a website content management system that you also need to do, make sure that all of those vendors / partners are looped in together and that we're sequencing that work in the correct way. So we really want to make sure that, okay, maybe we might advise you to say, yes, upgrade your accounting system first, then put your AMS in place, and then update your website and your content management system. That's a more logical, and there could be some overlap there, but when we go back to all the other areas in terms of prioritizing, features, dealing with staff time, that can really get in the way of a lot of those same people are involved in all the projects. You also want to look out for fatigue and everyone's day-to-day job. So if you have a 3-year roadmap of system upgrades, that could be really challenging with your existing staff. So you may need to augment staff, bring on additional people, maybe even bring on, we've had customers who brought on people in a contract or temporary capacity where they can come in and help manage some of the projects. You know, they're working for you, not necessarily working for one of the partners or vendors, but they're working on behalf of you to really shepherd that through. So those are my four big areas. Being that I talk reasonably fast, I am about 5 minutes ahead of my 30 minutes of content that I had planned out. So I'm hoping to see some questions in here. And you know, if anyone hasn't thought of a question yet, feel free to post it in the chat window. If anyone wants to ask a question, I'm going to go ahead and go off script here from Terry and say, go ahead, and I think there's a hand raise button. We can even unmute your mic, and you could ask the question because we have a few minutes to spare here. So.
Yeah, so Chris, I'm just watching this presentation, sort of gave me chills, not the good kind. I was having flashbacks of my times whenever I was in the throes of implementation, and so many of these points that you brought up were experiences that I had, including, you know, just that time sensitivity. You know, I had all of the things that were on my desk that had to get done, that it was really difficult to stop and do the things that I was supposed to do for implementation. So you know, the one that really resonated with me was like stopping and making sure that you're taking time, like physically carving it out of your schedule and having other people understand that that's what you have to do. So maybe it's a collaborative effort by the team to say like, hey, I'm going to have to take on this extra responsibility, so maybe somebody else can take something from me, you know, while I handle this. It's quite a taxing, you know, endeavor by anybody that has anything association related at their desk. So we're all kind of overtaxed, you know, at our desks, I think, at association. So, yeah, so full disclosure, I don't know how to unmute or fix somebody that has okay, here we go. Here's a question that has come through. I don't know how to unmute people. I'm just mass confession there. So Chris, if you feel like you need to unmute somebody, please jump in. But okay, here's a question. What?
If anyone raises their hand, I can unmute them.
Got it. Okay, cool. Okay, cool. So Renita asks, our website is outdated, and my thought was that we'd need to update our website and update our AMS at the same time. Which one would you suggest needs to be prioritized to work on first? We are currently using a legacy system, and the two are so closely intertwined that I don't know if we can separate the two. This is a really great question. Chris, what you got?
Yeah, that's a real conundrum, right? Because sometimes your current system, the CMS functionality might have actually, you know, there are some systems out there that include CMS functionality. And so when you include that, that's a really difficult, you know, difficult challenge. So I think that that is probably one area where you would have to do your best to line those two projects up. You know, I would try to separate the team who's involved in sort of the, you know, the marketing and design and content of the website with the team that's working on the system and the integration points, and just do your best to line those up. I think that's a situation where if they are sort of so married together, at some point you might need to do that. You know, luckily we're seeing more and more today where people have moved their websites to standard, you know, standard CMS platforms, Drupal, WordPress, etc., so that you do have that bifurcation between the two. So you have to obviously redo the integrations and the single sign-ons and some of the dynamic content that's coming out of the back-end system. But in the case where they're so tightly coupled, I think you don't have a choice but to overlap those two at the same time. I would encourage you to use this opportunity to move your website to a platform that is not tightly coupled, with any one backend system. So I think that's the approach that most organizations are moving towards as we go forward. Is if you can afford it. Obviously, WordPress, you can get that for free or next to free in terms of hosting. I always recommend paying the nominal fee to have the non-free version of WordPress. It's worth the money, but that's a pretty low cost. But obviously, the implementation, the redesign, that can add up after a while. But I really do think that's probably one example where you probably have to do both. My guess is that you probably had that system in place for a long time as well. So.
Yeah, so that's really good advice, Chris. And I feel for you, Renita. My initial thoughts, if I can just add 2 cents here, would be, the level of effort is so great for you to switch either one of those. And the reason why is because they're so intricately entwined, right? You almost takes one to work the other and vice versa. So, when you go through your move, it's inevitable, right? Because if you're on a system that is archaic and you need to get into the times, right? And it's about to be 2020, hello, right? It is the level of effort is going to be high. The budget, the time, the resources on the staff are going to be high. So knowing that going into it, you might as well go ahead and tackle both, right? Like Chris said, like it's going to be a pain no matter what. So,
I
but
used to tell people that anyone, if you're out shopping for a new system, and anyone who tells you it's going to be easy and pain-free is lying to you. What we're trying to do here is minimize that pain. It's hard work, it's pain, but at the end, if you do it right, it's worth it. So that's the key outcome.
Right, and just keeping that lens, like you don't want to find yourself in the exact same situation that you're in now 10 years from now, right? So if you can kind of focus on the new stuff that's going to come through, yes, it's going to be painful, but if you can focus on the new that's going to happen with AMS and CMS, and that that the situation is going to be different forever, right? And you're kind of making a change for the organization, and you look at it through that lens, it kind of does make it a little bit more palatable, right? So, so we have another question that's come in from Alex. What is the ideal size of the customer team to work on an AMS project? What do you got, Chris?
So I will give you my classic "it depends" answer, but I do have pretty strong feelings on this, and I only say it depends because organizational size can sometimes dictate needing a few more people involved. But we like 5 is kind of a somewhat arbitrary number, but no less than 3, no more than 10 is really what we shoot for. No matter how large your organization is, that 5 to 7 is really the sweet spot. It's enough people to get representation from different areas, but it's a small enough team to actually be decisive, because not divisive, but decisive, is, it's really key to have a small group to be leading the day-to-day, especially when you're dealing with your partner's implementation team. That doesn't mean that you can't pull other people in as needed. So as you're going through specific areas, so we get to the events piece, let's say, you probably want someone from your event team on that project team, but if they need to bring in other subject matter experts for that specific item, for sort of breakout meetings or some additional testing or requirements review, then that's okay. But keeping that core team to around 5 people, we find that that's kind of a sweet spot in terms of that. You get up to 10, 15 people, and you're just not going to make any decisions, and it's going to be too all over the place. I had a meeting a couple months ago where we walked in, and there were 36 people in the room, and we brought 5 people. The customer had 31 people, and everyone here can imagine the productivity level of that meeting. So it's really challenging to get a lot done with a large group. So
Yeah, so this is a great question because I do a session, Chris, you may have seen it somewhere along the way, but it's 10 commandments of AMS transitions. And one of the slides, one of the commandments in there is about, it's basically like not sabotaging the project by doing it yourself, right? So this is one of my very early on mistakes when I was kind of a newbie at picking technology. I was like, yeah, oh, I got this. Everybody else is busy. I know I'm busy, but I don't mind burning the midnight oil to get this project done, get this out the door so we can reinvent what it is, how we're connecting with our members and how we're storing the core systems of record and blah, blah. And I was so excited to take on this project. And it did make us more efficient. But let me tell you, on the days where somebody was mad at the system, guess whose door they came knocking on? My door. You know what? And it's inevitable, like that people are going to get frustrated with the systems. Like it's just part of the reality of adopting a new tool. There's no such thing as a perfect husband or a perfect wife. It's the same thing with AMS. Like finding the perfect AMS it doesn't exist, right? So, but finding the one that's the best fit for you. But really what it comes down to is it has to be a joint effort so that no single person can actually point a finger at another person. Fortunately, my colleagues were understanding enough that I didn't get fired or anything awful, but definitely having the decision fall on just my shoulders, or even if it was just my shoulders and one other person's shoulders, was not enough. We needed a more collaborative effort. So if for nothing else, then diversifying the project management tasks and bringing in multiple eyes to understand what has to happen, if nothing other than that, just to kind of save your butt, and that's the nice way of putting it.
That's interesting because when we see it, from my perspective on the other side, we rarely see that as a problem these days. I don't know but that's a good point. You don't want too few people to either overburden them or put too much on their shoulders in terms of the organization. I can't remember in the last few years when we've ever seen that. Most of the times we have to do everything we can to reduce the number of people. We reach out and said, okay, congratulations, we're going to start this project. This is great. You're part of the Cobalt family. Send us a list of all the people you want at the kickoff meeting, and we get a list of 25 people. And so that's really where, so we usually have to pare things down, but that's a very interesting perspective. I think that making sure you have enough bandwidth on the team, for both getting the work done and for the CYA that you were talking about, Terry, can be important as well. So.
Yeah. So we've got one more question. And I think this is a good one. Thanks, Ren, for asking. How do you balance asking for input and staying on track? So I think the question is how do you balance going to these different departments and asking questions and getting feedback from them, yet still trying to stay on track with the project management schedule?
Yeah, I think that kind of comes back to a theme that goes throughout the different things I was talking about. Is it's really that balance of having everyone involved, getting the input that you need, but at the same time educating people up front that not everything can be part of the system. So as long as everybody, I think, and that's a key message that can come down from on high, from your CEO, executive director, or whoever the most senior person that would be involved in this, and really setting that tone for, we're going to have open conversations, we're going to field ideas, but that doesn't mean that all the ideas are going to get implemented. I think that's also important when you reach out to your members as well, if you want to bring a subset of members in, is that not everything can get done, but that doesn't mean you should shy away from getting input from people. So I think you just have to set, it's about expectation setting, if nothing else, is if you set that expectation properly up front, you have at least you have a better chance of making sure everyone understands that. It's human nature that people want their things in the system. And so you just have to sort of manage that the best you can. But I think the other side of not opening it up, you end up with a system that doesn't meet everyone's needs. One of the things we ask for at the beginning of our projects are, we go through and ask people for top 10 daily tasks. So what do you do today in your system? And then what do your customers or members do, online? What are the top things that are done on a daily basis? And we try to get that from a couple of different groups and really mash it into when we go to the priorities, because inevitably you could leave one of those things out, and we really don't want that, especially for the people that are in the system every day, for a decent chunk of their day. We want to really make sure that we get all of those things out. So I think that you want to open it up because you don't want to miss something. The worst case scenario is you spend all this time, all this money, and you get to the end and you realize that there are really some key items and key things that people are doing, and you missed those. So closing the process, I think living with a little bit of complaining and maybe a little grumbling from people who don't get what they want is worth the upside of making sure you at least consider all the different requests. So, but expectation,
really
it's all about expectation setting. So,
yep. I love that advice on just like your opinion or your ideas are going to be heard, but it might not necessarily mean that it's going to happen. And saying that before you kind of even start getting their feedback, so that they kind of have a level of understanding that, yeah, this is kind of a space where they might not take my advice, right? And that makes it okay, when it doesn't get implemented later, like you're preventing the angry bees from, firing after you. But, I heard recently, someone said that when they come to the lead project manager of the AMS implementation with a new idea, or they're in a big circle or a brainstorming session, or they're with the powers that be that are helping decide on what system to go with, that they put all of the people's ideas on to a roadmap. So it's not that it's not going to happen ever. It's just not going to happen at implementation. Because in order to streamline implementation, to get to go live so that we can stay on track, so that we can do the business functions that we need to do, we have to just have a trimmed down list of needs, right? That we absolutely have to have. Like, these are the deal breakers. If we don't have these, we can't run our system, right? Yep. And then after implementation, you have this whole life, right? Your AMS can be like an organic machine, right? It doesn't have to be just a flip the switch and it's all there and on, and what people don't have today, they're never ever going to have, right? Like, you say, no, we can do that. We're just going to do that in 6 months, or we're going to do that in 9 months, or that's on the long-term plan. It's there. We haven't forgotten about it. We haven't forgotten about you. We care about it. It's just not a top priority right now. And then as new needs come in for the business, and I say business because associations and running the system this way is like running a business, right? As new needs come in for the organization, those can get added to the roadmap, right? So, and then whoever that project manager is can just can manage that entire stream of information as new releases or new build outs happen with the AMS itself, So I don't know. I think that's kind of been an interesting development in modern technology, is that you don't have to have everything that the system absolutely has to do for everybody at go live. Like, it's okay if some of the things wait a little bit.
That's for sure. Yep.
So we do have another question that came in, and everybody that has joined the webinar today is still on the line, so it must be good, Chris. So we're going to just keep going, and then you guys just, if you've got other priorities you have to go to, we get it. But Alex asks, do you have any good project management or collaboration tools you like to use to run a project? Chris, I'm sure you have recommendations for your clients on how to manage a new implementation like this. What you got?
So we use a couple. So for those of you who don't know, we're a Microsoft shop. Our AMS or membership product is built on top of Microsoft Dynamics 365, which is Microsoft's CRM platform. So, we sort of drink all the Microsoft Kool-Aid over here at Cobalt. That said, we also understand that, we want the best tools for our customers when we're running projects. We use a variety of different tools, both internal and external. We currently use a product called Teamwork PM. I think it might just be called teamwork.com now. It used to be called Teamwork PM for basic milestone and scheduling and things like that. And then we use another piece of software that's called FogBugs, which is used to be from a company called Fog Creek in New York. They recently branched off, so it's just its own company, but FogBugs with a Z. Unfortunately, the name has bug in the name, like it's not really what you want as a software person. So there, I think it was originally created for tracking software bugs, but that's not what we use it for. And that goes back to Terry's backlog management. We really use that tool a lot for defining and tracking our requirements. It's sort of a threaded base system, so that's really good for pushing requirements through the life cycle and getting it into our team's hand for input. So take an idea to a requirement to instructions for the person who needs to either write the code or do the configuration to the person who's testing it and then ultimately approving it, and that tracks it through that full life cycle. We've been really happy with FogBugs. We're starting more and more to use Microsoft Teams, especially for our internal collaboration, and we're starting to use that a little bit more with some of our customers as well, in terms of customers that are using Office 365. We're doing some collaboration back and forth in Teams. With our user group, our Cobalt user group, we have an online forum, but we also do some communication directly in Microsoft Teams as well. Microsoft's putting a ton of, we don't sell it, so I can pump it up a little bit. Microsoft's really putting a lot into that. If anyone's ever used Slack, Microsoft has got their eyes on Slack, and they're just putting, a lot of time and effort and money into Microsoft Teams. So I think we're going to see more and more of that over the coming years. It's got a lot of collaboration, whiteboard sharing and brainstorming and all those, video calls and all the stuff that you would expect there. So those are the three tools that we use primarily. There are tons of them out there. There's a lot of other good tools. One of our challenges is to stop looking at tools when, we're software nerds, so we like to look at new cool things. And so you also have to just keep yourself in check to make sure you're, not switching processes and switching tools as the new shiny thing comes out. So.
Yeah, I definitely have that problem too, Chris. I can totally sympathize there. I'm like, ooh, shiny new thing, or, my friend's using a software and it's slick, and I'm like, oh, I need that. And the next thing you know, I've got like 80 subscriptions, and 3 of them are the same type of tool. It's kind of unwieldy. But there's also, to just go a little off Microsoft for a minute, but there's I've used Teamwork and Basecamp, both of those. I'm currently using Teamwork with my projects.
Yep. Yeah,
And
that's
then,
that's our main PM tool today, Terry, is teamwork. Yep.
oh, okay. Okay, got it. Okay. Yeah, and then Basecamp is what I used when I was at in my association. So both of those are really good as well. But yeah, there's tons of them out there. All you got to do is Google, project management, and they're all different price ranges, but for the most part, they're pretty affordable. So, and the ones that are integrated with Microsoft, obviously, if you have, if you're using Office in your office, um, that's couldn't be any slicker of a fit, right?
Yep.
I'm sure you could agree with that, Chris.
Yep.
Okay, so we are now to the bottom of the questions. I think this has been really helpful to the audience here. We appreciate your insights, Chris, and for the ongoing support that Cobalt offers to Review My MS. It really means a lot. I think this is a fun time of year, right? So you totally played with the theme. I loved it. But I think people that are watching this even in June of next year will still get a lot out of it. I'm going to leave you guys with a surprisingly applicable quote from one of my favorite TV personalities, Homer Simpson, who's dressing up like Homer this year. Every time I learn something new, it pushes some old stuff out of my brain. So out with the old and in with the new ways to elevate your members' experiences with your organization and learning new things. To all of our attendees today, thank you for being here. Thank you, Chris. Everyone have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you, everybody.
Bye now.